or Stephen Fitzgerald, and also worked with Jesse Rosell in the chemistry department. So I'm going to talk about hydrogen storage in metal organic frameworks. This is a picture of our ultimate goal, clean energy car powered by hydrogen. You have to be a little careful when we talk about hydrogen as energy, because it's not, you can't really think of it as a source of energy. It's more of a way to store energy, kind of like a battery. Because we can't really go up and like dig hydrogen out of the ground like a fossil fuel. You really have to split water into hydrogen gas and oxygen gas. And then you put it in a hydrogen fuel cell, and it recombines them to produce water and energy. But we need a way to store this hydrogen, and there's two criteria we have to fill. It has to hold enough hydrogen at a reasonable temperature and pressure, and it has to release the hydrogen easily enough so we don't need a lot of energy. The Department of Energy requires 9% hydrogen by weight if you want to store this in a car. And I'll get back to this part in a second. If we want to release it easily enough, you think about 30 to 50 kilojoules per mole would be required to achieve this. No known system has been able to meet all these requirements yet. So you might think you just put a lot of hydrogen in a high pressure tank, but really that would be way too massive. You can't get enough hydrogen there by weight. If you store it as a liquid, you can't really, it's not really practical to have cryogenic temperatures inside the car, so that doesn't really work either. So what we're trying to do is store it in material, and what we're working on is a subfield of that called physisorption, trying to create a hydrogen sponge, something that's really porous that will trap molecular hydrogen in it. Currently, this binds too weakly. We have it on the order of 10 kilojoules per mole, and you remember we wanted to get up to 30 from the last slide. The class of materials we're working with now, they're called MOFs, Metal Organic Frameworks. This is MOF 5, which was worked on a couple years ago, and there was a lot of excitement over it. It's a crystalline structure, so basically a big lattice with metal oxides at the corners and organic molecules linking them. That big yellow sphere is not actually anything, it's the space where the hydrogen can go. So why do we like MOFs? They're low density, they're porous, they have a relatively high binding energy compared to other materials we've looked at, and they have a tunable structure, which means you can create all sorts of different kinds of MOFs, make them all sorts of different sizes by exchanging organic compounds and exchanging metals. But this also means that there's all sorts of variation on it. So we can't just go and check every single MOF. We have to figure out what makes a good MOF, what holds a lot, what has a high binding energy, and why that happens. The MOF we looked at is called MOF 74. We focused in on cobalt. A group before us did zinc, and we did a little bit with the nickel. We're looking at this kind of at an angle. You can see it's lots of hexagons in a plane, and they're kind of stacked on top of each other. So the way you figure out, the standard way of figuring out how much hydrogen can go into a material, you just load it up with hydrogen to a fixed pressure, see how much the pressure drops when you open it to the sample, and then repeat it until it no longer absorbs hydrogen. So you can see the cobalt, it got up to about 2% weight, 8%. And we wanted to get up to 9 eventually, so we're still a little bit of a ways off. So that's all well and good, but we really want to see how the hydrogen behaves inside of the MOF. And how we do that is infrared spectroscopy. Basically, we have an infrared source that shines infrared radiation onto our sample after focusing from mirrors. Some of the photons are absorbed by the sample, and others are scattered off in random directions. The ones we care about are absorbed, and finally they reach detector. So it's the missing photons which cause quantum transitions. So we can think of hydrogen as basically two protons. It can move like two masses on a spring back and forth like this. It can move rotationally around, and then its center of mass can move around in free space. The infrared photons with the correct energy will excite hydrogen from one energy level to the next. The main one we're concerned about, because that's the one in the infrared, is the vibrational transition. We also see vibrational plus rotational transitions and vibrational plus translational transitions. It turns out when you absorb hydrogen into a material, the energy of each level goes down, and the higher energy states go down by more. So actually, this is the gas phase hydrogen and the energy level, and this is what we measure in the host. So you can compare these two and figure out the difference between the binding energies, and that will tell you how much binding energy we have for the hydrogen in the host, which is what we wanted to find out, which is what we want to get to 30 kilojoules per mole. So we can take the redshift out of that energy transition and estimate the binding energy. And it gets, this is the pure vibrational, and if we add in some, these are rotational modes, we get a much more complicated picture. This is our spectra. We have absorption on the vertical axis and pretty much energy on the horizontal axis. This bottom graph is the zinc. Then we have the cobalt and the nickel. And so you can see that the pure vibrational site gets redshifted from the gas phase in increasing amounts as we go from zinc to cobalt to nickel. And these are literature binding energies. So you can see our experimental redshift goes up as the literature binding energies go up. Here we looked at the cobalt MOF74 at around 30 Kelvin. We used liquid helium to cool it. We have increasing amounts of hydrogen inside the MOF74. Here is our primary site. The hydrogen comes into four different sites within the MOF. You can see it's the hydrogen site is the first one to fill up. The primary site is the first one to fill up. And then the secondary site starts to fill up around the green line. And then the tertiary site starts to fill up right here at the blue line. And you'll notice that the secondary site doesn't start filling until the primary site is already full. And same with the tertiary site, doesn't start filling until the secondary site is full. Here's another picture of the MOF74. And you have the primary site, secondary site, tertiary site. Those are all the ones that we saw. We also have a fourth site, quaternary site, in purple. Now, if we go back to this redshift graph, you'll notice that here's the primary site on these three. This one gets redshifted as we exchange the different metals. But the secondary site actually doesn't get redshifted. So that means that the secondary site's binding energy doesn't get affected when you change the metals in the MOF74, which is kind of bad news because we wanted to change the energy, we wanted to change the binding energy. So that's something we found out. In conclusion, what did we learn? The secondary site doesn't start filling until the primary site is full. When you substitute metals, you affect the binding energy of the primary site, but you don't make a big difference on the secondary site. We think that's because the secondary site is about twice as far away and there's a large radial dependence. We saw more evidence for the direct correlation between redshift and binding energy. And we created more parameters for those who were trying to model this hydrogen inside MOFs, because it's currently very hard to model it. Future plans, we want to look at manganese and magnesium, the other two types of MOF74, and we're looking to make modifications so we can allow more sample and more accurately determine the temperature. I'd like to thank my lab partners Jordan and Ben, my mentor Stephen, and Jesse Rozelle, who actually made the MOFs for us.
some sort, or your MOPs, they're all one material. Is there any way to like combine several of them to get an overall percentage of 9%? Kind of piece.
Combine different MOPs, you mean?
Yeah, into like one vehicle or something. You ever tried that?
We haven't tried it. I'm not sure why that would
Well, I
make
think
it better.
well, if you can only get like if you do one out of cobalt, you can only get 3%. Well, why don't you like do a cobalt and a manganese one?
Oh, well, because it's 3% of the total volume. It'll scale by volume. So if you had, 3%, because it's you remember it's a big lattice. So you have 3% hydrogen of the total weight of whatever you have.
Okay.
So it fills the whole space.
That makes sense.
You mentioned it's more of a storage device than an actual source of energy. So do you need to put some kind of energy in to store the energy?
Right. Well, how they do it is they split apart water, H2O, to make hydrogen and oxygen, but that takes energy. So we're really not, creating any energy.
So with this,
It's a cycle.
is this like a feasible option in terms of replacing petroleum as a source of energy, or do we have a way to put the energy in?
Right. Well, you need other types of clean energy if it's going to be completely clean, but at least you're not burning, fossil fuels in your car. Maybe solar or wind, something like that. Are there no other questions?